Okay, we're back. And so, yeah, why don't you just pick up on where we left off? We were talking about your cancer experience. We certainly talked about how the church came around you in a beautiful way. And we talked about your own rite of passage and you having to confront death for the first time and what that did for you.
Right. And so, kind of this interesting thing is that, I didn't see it this clearly at the time, but going through that experience and is what started planting the seeds of asking questions. And there weren't, I feel like there was something in that course had been stripped away in the sense of,
Well, perhaps fear.
Exactly.
Because I remember
fear had been
you were
stripped
like,
away.
I'm not. Your rite of passage took away a lot of fear.
Right, because after that, it's like all of a sudden, some deep down, it's like the permission to ask questions is there, and it's not a place of fear. It's from a place of wanting to essentially know God deeper. And so over the course of that cancer, it's so transformative, and I was so supported by my friends, so supported by my youth group, but actually so supported by you and Mom and my siblings. Like, it was just nothing but support every step of the way, to where all I had to do was walk it out. All I had to do was just show up, which made it so manageable, so possible to go through.
And yet, I think you did experience some, let's call it dark nights of the soul, right?
Yeah, there's definitely moments where you're just like, I'm so tired of this. I'm so done with this. I'm so exhausted of feeling so weak. And so,
chemo took its soul. You were throwing up, and
it was. I just like the exhaustion that, like, I couldn't move very well anymore. I couldn't play basketball. I couldn't, like, going on a walk around the block was the extent of, like, that was like the extent of what I could do at 16. So that was hard. And near the end of it, I do remember feeling frustrated at how how exhausted I was, how sick I felt. And it wasn't even sick, it was sick from the chemo.
I remember, though, and at the end of it, where I knew this is a different man now. He's no longer a boy, he's no longer even he's a man. At the end of the chemo, I sometimes tell this story because I loved it. Because basketball was a big deal, right? In terms of, I loved it, basketball, growing up, and we were in Durham, North Carolina, or Duke and Carolina, all that happens. And you were a great basketball player, and I coached you early on, all the way through until you got to like junior high. And so my thought was, when you got back, out of your chemo, and once the doctor approved you to go back, then you'd be back at it. And I was excited to think, you get to go back and play basketball. Right. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good physically. But then it also didn't feel like something I was willing to struggle for. It was like,
it's not worth it.
My body was different after that. And looking back, it changed my body internally, and like through the spinal taps and like all these things that came like so much, and went back. I remember, I think it was either first or second practice back, and I was just like, this doesn't feel good, and I feel different. I can't jump the way I used to jump. I couldn't run the way I used to run, even though I was like running and even though I was working out outside of it, just basketball, and it just wasn't able to do it. So I just decided that I'm not doing that. I'm not playing basketball anymore.
Well, I loved it. You may not remember it, but you called me after that first or second practice, whenever that was, and this is what I mean about you were now a man, and you were doing things that, that you realize, like, what do you want in life? Right. And you called me and said, Dad, hate to tell you this, but I think a lot of basketball, the reason I play, is more about you than about me. I want to be in a band, and that's what I'm going to do. It's like, wow. I just remember being stunned and so proud of you, though, and so proud of you. Yeah. I want you to play basketball, of course. You're really good at it, and I was proud of that. But then for you to come out of all that in the chemo and become a man, through your rite of passage and to call me man to man, saying, no, that's more for you, less for me right now. I want to be in a band. So that was I thought it was a beautiful thing.
Right. Yeah, and it was one of those things. Like I was willing to go through adversity for something that feels worth it, but it was like, I'm not going to go through adversity. I'm not going to battle in order to play basketball when it's not even like pulling my heart.
Right.
So I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm done with that. But yeah, so that after all that and the connection to the church and all that, I actually wanted to be closer to God, like deep down. And I was reading more books and, like C.S. Lewis. I was exploring more and then asking questions. And like, I remember like one of those early questions coming out of that season was about hell, because it was like that was always part of the narrative. It's not like that was fundamental aspect of the narrative, but it was in the bubble. I didn't even have to consider. It's like I and every person I know is saved.
If they,
well, not everyone was good. Everyone was in that. Everyone had accepted Jesus.
Right.
Like I didn't know anyone that was going to hell.
Right.
But then at that point,
because they've done what you have to do in order to not go to hell. Right. They believe the right thing.
Exactly. Everyone went to church and believed all the stuff, and yeah, it was. But then I started asking the question beyond myself and the people that I know of, like, hold on a second. Like I was like, I feel like I just experienced so much love through all of this, and that was the first question of like, how does this all-loving God allow for conscious eternal torment? Like, just allow for that. Just how is that an existential reality? And that question, like, and it felt innocent at the time, and it felt like it felt very rational and very simple even. And but yeah, at some point within that year afterwards, that question started being with me.
Mm-hmm. And this was, I remember you obviously that was at 16, so let's say 17. So
this question started, and that started
growing.
At that point, I'm like, I feel like I'm pursuing God and making God more of a priority in my life than it had ever been before. Like after cancer and my connection with my church, and like it was the center of my life, like God and the part of life that orients around God was the center of my life.
And
my relationships, the love that I just experienced, my church, my youth group, and just my devotion. It's like I just made it through this rite of passage, through death.
And it all worked out. Right? Because maybe, we're doing the right things in some ways. I don't know if there's that kind of quid pro quo understanding. Of course not. And it just felt like, gosh, the way the community comes around us, and it just it was a nice bubble.
We made it. Yeah, we made it. And like I said, everything had gone as good as possible. There were no issues ever. Like it had essentially the best case scenario of the medicine is what had happened.
Right. And so then you started having more and more questions.
And it was coming out of just wanting to understand more, wanting to learn more, wanting to grow.
And this over a long period of time, right? Because let's say you graduated from the classical academy, you then...
Well, so yeah, and that question starts while I'm still in high school, while I'm after that, but while I'm still there. And, just like simple things like, just the conscious eternal torment. Like, and it would just be like, all right, like on both sides of it, it's like, just look at humans throughout history. It's like, the classic Gandhi of like, so Gandhi is in conscious eternal torment for all of history. It's like, how does this all-loving God allow for that? It's like because he didn't believe the thing, and it's like that feels hard,
incongruent.
And then on the other side, though, it's like talking about justice. It's like, is conscious eternal torment ever just? It's like I was even at that point. I was like, even Hitler doesn't deserve conscious eternal torment.
I've always thought, Hitler 200-300 years of torment, maybe, but then it's something.
Right, but this thing of like,
maybe he's paid the price. Even he's the worst.
Even the worst human of all time type of thing that we talk like, but still, it's like, but even that person, like conscious eternal torment. I was like, even like that's not just.
Even if he had to be tortured for 1,000 years for every person that died during the Holocaust,
Right,
it wouldn't be
and
eternity.
that's still that's a blink of an eye in eternity.
An eternity, right?
And
In other words, it wasn't congruent. I mean, it was very hard to, and I've been told stuff like, you know, that verse of do not lean on your own understanding. I've been taught don't question too much. If you lean on your own understanding, you just gotta basically follow what the Bible says. You know, then you don't get caught in that trap of your own understanding. But at the gut level and every other level, it just seemed a little crazy, right?
Yeah, it was a slow unfolding, and so, but at the same time, I feel like that is what moved me in the direction of asking questions. So then it's all sorts of
over the course of years.
And then so then I end up going to college and for the first time encountering non-Christian bubble. And so that's like opening and it like not.
And a lot of people say, parents, if you send your kid to a non-Christian school, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I was at a state school, and
yeah.
You know, I ended up making friends that weren't Christians, and I liked being around them. It's like, and
they might be going to heaven.
And I wasn't really thinking that way. Part of it was just like this sense of, like I never liked evangelism, like having to convince somebody of something. I never really liked it, and even in college, I like all these apologetics is a big thing when I was in high school, and I learned it all. Actually, I learned it all. We did classes and these things, and like.
So you knew how to argue for the points.
There's like the Truth Project. There's all these things that I had done. I like went through these courses and these trainings, read the books, watched the videos, like
on how to argue for the narrative you've been taught.
Exactly. But yeah, it never really. What is it? I mean, part of it is it's hard to know that. But then I think also like how our world ends up framing the God versus science dynamic, I think that got into me. I think that was this thing of like, with Christianity, evangelical Christianity, being so at odds with modern scientific ideas, ended up being an issue for me, especially as like the worldly perspective is that science is what was the vehicle through which I was healed through the cancer.
Right.
And so this antagonism between science and religion, and when I was in college, it was a big deal, and it slowly, like that ended up being a big wedge for me.
I remember even Mom giving you a book, seeing you struggle about evolution and how science and evolution is, I guess, maybe biblical teaching and. Trying to find,
and like trying to reconcile,
find a common ground,
to reconcile it, but it's hard in the sense of like having the conversations was rare, and having the conversations in good faith was rare, but from both sides, either from Christianity's antagonism towards scientific worldviews, and then scientific worldviews antagonism towards Christianity. And so being in a state school, having lots of friends and like studying science and like wrestling with it, that was a big part of it. And slowly, especially in college and studying computer science, like I started going more and more into the logical, rational framing of things. And I actually never, after I left my youth group, this is something I've realized. I went to so many churches when I was at college, and I went to all the college groups, I went to all the things, and I actually never ended up in a connected place like I had in that youth group. And so it ended up.
But you really tried. I remember.
I went to every church I was invited to. I went to every on-campus thing, and I was doing it. I was like plugging in, but it never stuck. It faded away, and for whatever reason, it never was like I didn't have to try to be plugged into my youth group. It was just, it pulled my heart. And that never happened after I left that youth group again. It never.
So you were now.
I'm at a state school, and you know, like
You
one of my
had the
one of my
religion.
best friends ended up not being a Christian at that time, and
Oh.
and we didn't really talk about it, but like, it's just all the narratives of how, like, yeah, it's hard to, but yeah, it's hard to even fully describe. And
Well, then let's fast forward then, because
but over the course of college, and especially the first year or two, I was doing everything I could to stay plugged in, because I knew all the things. I even knew, like, make sure you stay plugged into a church when you're at college, because people fall away from their faith when they're at college. And so I
could just blame your parents for sending you to a state school, right? Because they're not a Christian school, but I don't know.
But and so it was just a slow, and then slowly, like, as I started asking questions, the antagonism I would get back, I just was like, I stopped even resonating with, like, I was like, man, if you can't even ask these questions and it just becomes a fight and an antagonism, it's like it makes you not even want to engage it anymore.
Right. Well, let's go to our let's call it that encounter. Right. Is important because.
And so over the course of all of college, but the last 2 years of college is really when it started to fall away. I don't want to do this anymore. I stopped. I didn't want to be around Christians. Like, I didn't want to be defending myself, or I didn't want to have to, like, I didn't feel like I was actually fitting into the group anymore eventually, and so it slowly fell away. And I started doing research of arguments against the Christianity, like all the apologetics and all the arguments for Christianity that I'd done. I started researching the opposite side of it all. And so by the time I finished college and I was working a job in Denver,
now there's a lot more information available, right?
Oh yeah, the internet. You can research everything.
Well, I remember growing up, by the way, and there was never any books that you were given that certainly were prior to Martin Luther, right? Most of them were very modern and et cetera. Yeah, I remember, Catholics, they're going to hell, And so yeah, it was hard to find information back then for me without a lot of work. Right. And for you had way more information.
All the information
through the internet. So yeah. I remember getting a call from you saying, "Dad, we need to talk." You remember that call?
I do.
And it was basically, we need to meet. And well, what is this about, son? And you basically said, well, no, it needs to be something we talk in person, kind of man to man.
Yeah. Because I knew it was like, at that point, it was my Christianity had died. Uh-huh. It was like I didn't identify with it at all anymore. Yeah. I actually felt angry at it. I felt repulsed by it.
And why? So why did you call me to tell me you didn't want to do it over the phone?
Because I couldn't. I had to, like, everything we've been through. I had to share it in person. I couldn't pretend. I couldn't hide it. I had to share it with you. I knew it was a big freaking deal.
Big freaking deal. You called and you wouldn't tell me what it's about, and you were traveling, or I was traveling, or both.
Yeah,
and it's going to be like a week before we could really even get together. And so then my mind starts going all over the place. I'm like, I don't know, what is he going to say? My number one fear was cancer was back. And you were trying to figure out, or you were going down a path. Now you're adult, you just decide what you're going to do, and your cancer's back. I remember that. Or I thought, well, maybe maybe needs to say, he's gay, or who knows what? Who knows all? I mean, you go down 1,000 paths, or, and I guess the cancer one's one that really worried me, right? As you can imagine from our experience together. And so for a week, I remember being just almost paralyzed by the worry of what in the world, because you'd never done that, where, no, we've got to talk face to face. So it had to be big.
Yeah.
And I can remember on the way up, driving up, I had one of the, call it experiences, where God tell me, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? And I just feel like God gave me the image of the prodigal son of, it doesn't matter what he says. you're going to put your arms around them and you're just going to tell them you love them. That's all you got to do, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, so some calm came over me that I at least knew a pathway of what to do. And I feel like God really showed up for me as far as on my way up to see you. So we had that dinner together. You shared that.
Yeah, I just said I don't believe in God anymore, and I gave these reasons of all the stuff of like in the Bible, or these kind of the difficulty of reconciling the Old Testament God, or
well, I remember you saying, well, Dad, I don't believe in God genocide.
Yeah,
They would kill all his children, the cattle, and everything else. I don't believe in a God that would condone slavery in any way, shape, or form. I don't believe in a God that doesn't like gay people. Doesn't believe in a God that would treat women that way. And I don't know if you said it this way, but I remember it. I sure as hell don't believe in a God that would torture his children forever without any redemptive hope. Right. Just remember, oh my God, I got it. And I'm scared.
Right. And yeah, that was I had like at that point I was it was my Christianity. Like, my Christianity was dead. I didn't believe in it at all. I considered myself an atheist.
And fortunately, I hope I said,
and even like with the whole cancer stuff, it was and this whole like science and religion wedge that was such a big part of like the world, like my time, and which I feel sad because I don't feel like it needs to be that way, but that was but even then it was like even my cancer was healed by science. It was healed by the medicine, the research, like everything about it had been
through that time you'd rewritten the narrative of I don't believe that this is what happened, that had nothing to do with it, that was an hallucination or whatever.
It wasn't God. It was modern science that ended up saving my life, and all of the evidence I was able to put into that, because that was just this logical, rational thing. And even then, at that point, like a huge part of faith is your own inner experience. And whether growing up, and I had never at my entire life, this was in my early 20s at this point when we had that conversation, I had never felt like I'd had like an encounter with God, an encounter with Jesus in the way that a lot of people talk about in their own testimonies.
So you really didn't have a testimony.
I had never
an experience.
I had never had an experience.
You had all the information.
And I had all the information on both sides.
And believed it, whatever that means, right?
Yes.
In other words, you've been programmed into it.
Yes, and then I deprogrammed that, and I had all of the information on the opposing side.
Well, I can remember it's so important, as you can imagine. Number one, I'm relieved you don't have cancer. But I then went into, oh my gosh, I'm thinking as I'm recovering from all the emotion of this, and going, he may now be going to hell. And then I remember my natural instinct would be to go, well, you've been led astray somehow, maybe by going to CSU or not a Christian school or whatever, but we can get you back in the fold. We just need to, review what you had been taught or what you had been learning and, get you back, right? And, my evangelical instincts, I started feeling, and then I remember saying something like, hey, can we start getting together to go over what you learned? I'd like to see what you learned. Let's go over that together. And I remember you saying, well, Dad, I'm not here to proselytize or to convince you or to change your mind. I'm just here to feel like you're my father. And, I should let you know where I am.
Right. That was the reason I knew I had to just be honest of where I was at. Because I wouldn't have been able to like allow for that to be a hidden thing or something. I wouldn't have been able to like live in that. And so and especially after everything we'd been through.
Oh, right. And I was grateful that you told me, and I felt it was amazing that you trusted me enough. I guess you hoped that I would still love you, the same or more. I remember loving you more somehow, like, wow, that to me was a Holy Spirit thing in that moment. But then, I was scared too, right? And trying to get you to go over with me, you told me two things. I'm not here to proselytize. It's not about that. I really don't want to do that. You have your faith, and that's great. Now, I just want to tell you where I am.
I feel like if if you would have tried to convince me of anything, if you would have tried to been convincing me at that time, I would have just been angry, and I would have pushed it away. I would have just, it would have just made me angry, because I was already angry at Christianity. I'd become angry at Christianity at that point.
So love was just a good place to be. We can love each other as father, son.
Yeah.
And, you know, I guess I pushed a little bit to say, can we just journey together and talk about it? And you really didn't want to, you're hesitant, you're willing to, but you gave me 2 conditions. Number 1, you don't check your brain out the door.
Yeah.
And number 2, this is a biggie, that you're willing to change. You open your heart.
I asked you?
That you open your heart, that you'd be willing to change. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember that aspect, but I know that it was like, yeah, just like I felt hesitant about having
to do it.
Yeah. But
because you knew where I was coming from, right? You weren't trying to convince me of anything, and you probably didn't think I would.
I didn't want to be proselytized at. I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
I knew the playbook.
When that scared me, especially that second one, because if I really was honest with you that I'd be willing to change, then I'm, basically my soul, I was thinking of that verse, this unforgivable sin that once you know and then you reject, which is why I was afraid for you, right, that you're going to go to hell. And then I thought, well, am I going to risk my salvation? Yeah. But, it was kind of in that moment, I just, I've thought about it and articulated more later that I believe in that moment I realized that my love for you was bigger than my theology. And you had said something about, gosh, if, you didn't even think that let's say you had an offense against me, that there's nothing that I could do that would cause me to want to send you into torment forever. And would it? I'm like, no, I would never send you. You could do anything. I'll never send you into torment forever. Right. But that idea that, if I loved you more than that kind of theology, but God doesn't, just that alone, right? That's when I hit, like, God doesn't love you as much as I love you. How is that?
And that question, maybe that's where the anger came from, was just like, do we have to hold so tight to this conscious eternal torment? Like, even the fact that we are so sure that this conscious eternal torment is a fundamental part of our Christian belief and our Christian dogma, it's like, I think that's part of what made me angry, is like, the more and more I asked that question, and the consistency, like that's the reality, I think it just drove me crazy. I was just so angry. I was like, can we not soften that? Do we just have to hold this as truth, that this is how it is? And even though it doesn't feel human, it doesn't feel loving, it doesn't, like, it sits so against, like, what would make sense for unconditional love. Like, how could a God allow for that?
I remember 2 things. One, the first one of check your brain out. I'm like, well, I don't want to check my brain out, but, lean not on knowing understanding. Sometimes you just have to believe, and I don't know when that belief meter hits, but you just got to believe, and don't question. But more importantly was the second one about, am I willing to change? I want to be honest about, am I willing to change, and not just go into it, because you ask a fair question. Because if I'm not willing to change, then it's just I'm trying to proselytize to get you back. Right. If I am willing to change,
and that posture is actually not a relationship.
Right.
It's like, if your goal of being in a relationship with me is trying to convince me of something, that's not a relationship. And that's where my hesitation was. It's like, I don't want to be I don't want to be being convinced of something.
Right. You've been through enough of all that, right?
And I knew the playbook. I knew how it all goes. I'd spent all of high school learning apologetics.
And now's that point of, we're gonna have a real relationship. And a real relationship, I believe, real relationship requires you to both be open to learning from the other one and opening your hearts to change, right?
Absolutely.
That's what real relationship is. And so we agreed to start meeting every week or every other week or something in Denver, if you recall. And I would drive up some, and we'd go to like a hamburger joint.
Get a beer. And
Well, that was funny because I never drank beer before then. But I was like, well, look, I'll learn to drink beer, because that kind of went
Yeah,
against.
because like that was like that was when like all the breweries started growing.
Yeah, I didn't even like the taste of beer. I never drank. Of course, in my Southern Baptist background, you didn't drink, and I really didn't drink till literally after law school. That I had anything, as I thought you can't do that. And it's not I didn't drink anything, but I didn't even like the taste of beer. But then you said, "Hey, I'll teach you." And we were doing some nice breweries, some hamburger joints. But I don't know how long we met, but we met some and just shared and started looking into some different ideas and theology and just having the conversation.
Yeah.
So, and I will say for me, those conversations and that moment in time, you had already begun a lot of people, evangelicals, don't like the term deconstruction for whatever reason, but let's say just starting to question what I think I knew, that I was programmed from the very beginning. I believe exactly what my parents taught me and what their parents taught them. And so it really was that. And to really start going, well, it's fair to say I didn't even know anything about church history, about how these things like evolve, like terms like substitutionary atonement or original sin, or these things, because some things weren't necessarily right in the Bible, some of these terms. So how they evolve, and start studying some of that. So that was the start of mine, and I want to say to you, your courage to have that conversation, and your courage to say, look, a relationship means that we both open our hearts to have real conversation, and you're just not trying to convince me. And I thank you for that.
Yeah, because I knew I wouldn't have been like, it would have just, I think, I probably would have been angry, and I knew how the evangelism stuff worked, and I wasn't willing to engage in that.
And I had certainly some people in the evangelical world saying, hold on, you're the father. You brought him up in the faith, and you need to get him back, and you can't start questioning your faith just because he is, and he's smart, and you want to. And for me, it came back down to, it's just truth. I think you said that. Let's see what's true.
And ultimately,
the best we can tell.
Whatever is true doesn't need to defend itself. Truth doesn't need to defend itself, and truth doesn't need to prove itself, and truth doesn't. It's like whatever is true is just true, and that's in a certain way, like, no matter where you're coming from, you can kind of trust that. Like, the truth will.
And I remember thinking in terms of love, this unconditional love, which again I experienced only through my children. In terms of knew it was a real thing. I could have read that when I was 18 or when I was 20, but I wouldn't know it. It wasn't embodied until I experienced it with my own children. Right. But I remember thinking, well, God, if Colin's going to hell, we're just going to go together. So why don't we pause, and we'll be back for the next phase of this journey.